Welcome to Click Moments and Passionate Pursuits, The Unfolding. We're your hosts, Bridget
and Beth Orr.
And this is where intuitively guided conversations are followed with feral faith, enthusiasm, and joy, bringing new insights, inspiration, and perspectives along the way. And I have a question for you, Beth, to kick off today's episode, which we've pre-discussed. So here we go. I'm curious if you would tell me about the last time there was a concept that gripped you and just wouldn't let you go.
Gosh, I think most recently, even though I'm kind of in the middle of something similar, more recently, okay, I got two. I have to say two. Okay, so the first one is this concept of knowing versus believing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I used to talk about with the technique that I have, I talk about the importance of believing something before it can come true. But now I've come to the realization that it's actually the slight nuance different of knowing versus believing. And so when we know something, it's not the same inner stance as when we believe it, right? It's two totally different stances. So I would say that is one. And I have to tell you the other one that I'm milling over right now. I'm still like, it's still like the extent of it is still doing something inside me, but it's like revolutionary.
Okay.
And that's what I want to say. And thank you for this question, because it is really exciting, because I feel like when there's something that won't let go of you, it's doing something uniquely revolutionary within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But when other people can feel that enthusiasm and it connects with them, it's usually relevant to them too.
Yes.
Right. So the recent thing that I've been milling over has been around, I had an experience where the people from beyond that I've lost really are just right here. It's like literally as thin as this veil. And instead of like conceptualizing it and theoretically understanding that, I had the experience of it to where this person was right here. And any person that I knew beyond, I could literally think their name or say their name or request their energy, and they were right there, like right here with me. And I was like, what's the full extent of what this means? Because this is true.
Mm.
So now I'm reorienting, because now that I know it's true, now that I know it's true, not believe it. For years, I've believed it. But now that I know it's true, because I've experienced it and I felt it firsthand, then I'm like, oh my God, all the people that I've loved that have gone on literally are just right here. Not necessarily in the form that I remember them, but in the form that they choose to be, but it's still their energy and my knowing of them. If I want to access or have an interaction with them, all I have to do is call upon it, and I have access to that experience. It changes everything.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, what about you? Or do you want to
Well,
talk about
first,
it?
yeah, I have a question for you, because I don't want to gloss over this, and I think it's super
Yeah.
important. You said something about experience when you were saying, now that I know it's true, before I believed it, but now that I've experienced it. And I want to know, my question was, well, what cemented it into knowing? Like, what took it from belief to knowing?
Thank you. It's a great, great question or observation. So when we think it, then we wonder about it, but we're separate from it. So we're like, I wonder about that concept that there's a person right here and they're right here. And even when you experience them loosely as being here, like, you know that when you see a bird and that bird is supposed to be them, or you know that in your experience you've been asking about that person and there's some significant little interaction that says that they're here, it's still you reading into an experience around you to see that person in it, and more than likely it's that person. But when I'm in front of you, or I'm in front of my mom, or I'm in front of my grandma from beyond, when I'm in front of a person, there's a certain energetic feeling that they bring to the table, into the room. So I know what it's like to be in your presence. I know what it's like to be in each one of your children's presence, right? I know what it's like to be in my family members' presence, our friends. It feels different to be with them. And so when I had this experience with my grandma the other night, and I was like, wait, if this is true, that she's right here. Like, I had an experience where I looked over and there were lights that had, there was equipment that had no ability to have any kind of lights on working. And I knew in that moment, because I knew that it didn't have batteries. I knew in that moment that something was giving it energy, which is, that, because I was thinking about my grandmother, that it was more than likely her. So in that moment, I realized that she was trying to communicate with me, and I believed this. And then all of a sudden I was like, you don't need to believe this anymore. Like, what would it take to know this?
Mm-hmm.
And, but it was like, I felt her. I felt her here. It was like, I allowed myself to not have a mental experience of that concept, and I sunk into my actual body, and allowed for it to be what my heart could feel. I allowed for it to, like, my energy to sink into this space, and what would it feel like to be in my grandmother's presence? And as soon as I connected to empty space, it was like my grandmother was right there, and I wasn't having to come up with dialogue with her. I was saying something and she was saying something back, and it was like seamless and quick, just like a conversation. It was like I wasn't interjecting, I was experiencing her reaction. And so I had this back and forth conversation that was just like here, but her body wasn't here. It felt just the same as being with my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that reoriented. It was like, if this is true, which now it is, then what else does that then mean if that is true?
Mm-hmm.
And a whole series of things started to reorient in me, because I knew one piece of that knowledge that meant that other things that also go along with that one piece of knowledge changes what's possible in the world.
Oh man, this is so exciting. I have so much to bring to this conversation, but that your answer to that
Share it.
question
Yeah.
was ripe with conversation tidbits. So, okay, so I have this thought that when we have a concept that really grips us, especially those of us who are tuned to listen and pay attention for these things. So I think that this happens to a lot of us, if not all of us, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we tend to want to reason things away because we're human. And so we involve our human senses and our reason and our logic, and we just reason them away. But those of us who are really attuned to this, I think what we'll begin to notice the more we talk about these concepts that are gripping us, it won't let us go, the more we'll notice that the people in our immediate vicinity, not necessarily space-wise, but relationally,
Mm-hmm.
and the greater, like, broad humanity, I think that we'll notice that the climate there is ripe for these kinds of revelations, for these pieces of information. And like when we have something that grips us that we just can't let go of, I think there is a specific alignment of space and time and circumstance that is begging for those things, those pieces of information.
Mm-hmm.
And so those of us who are attuned and willing to bring them forward will find receptivity. So that's just a thought that I had around this. But I also think that you're good.
That's my
Usually
pup.
it's
You hear my
me.
pup?
Usually it's me with the barking.
It's playtime. Sorry.
So I also, though, have this theory, and this may or may not shake hands with what I just put forth, but I like just putting it all out on the table and then we can dissect it. I
Okay.
also have this theory that because we are all creators who are fully capable of bringing reality into alignment with our thoughts and our feelings and the way we want to interact with it, I think that a lot of the time, whenever we state something, oh, this is the way this is, it is because we say it is.
Mm.
It is because we say it is. So I could say, I want to experience the knowledge of my ancestors who've passed and their interaction in my life. And that will be my reality because I say it is. And I know plenty of people who say, oh, well, that doesn't happen for me. Well, of course it doesn't. Because
it's not your path.
Right, because you are able to control, to a certain extent, the reality with which you interact.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I don't know, imagine being in a video game and you're like, I'm going to walk into a room and it's going to be fully made of candy and I can eat every bit of it. Or in your dreams, we do this in our dreams all the time. And it is. And there's no barrier to you believing that that's possible.
Right.
Especially in the dreamscape. Like, you're like, yeah, totally. I just ate my window. It's totally real.
Right. Willy Wonka life.
Right. But we forget, like, we are disconnected from our nature as creators in this reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so we think that these things aren't possible, and we go from thinking it to experiencing it, and our experiences dictate our knowledge. So I didn't experience it, so it's not true for me, so it's not real. Well, then you just created that reality.
So is this the question that's when you asked me that question, is this the question that came up for you? Was this the concept of, like, we're basically just creating our reality? Like, are you saying that at one point that just landed for you in a new way?
Oh, the concept of creating our reality?
Well, no, like in general, you asked me what had been gripping me.
Mm-hmm.
And I told you I had two things.
Yep.
And I'm wondering if you're sharing what you're sharing now as your sharing of what's been gripping you. Or are you just it reminded you of that when you started to see what I had, like, what was on my heart?
Yeah, yes. And so I think I think this has been showing up for me in new ways, and it's been becoming more powerful, especially since, like, our realities bleed over, right? You and I, because
Mhm.
we're really close. So the knowing versus believing has been something that's been gripping you, and it's also been showing up for me in my own flavor.
Got it.
So
Got it.
so for me, how that shows up for me is that, well, if I say it is, it is. And that's
Right.
my experience. So that's what I know. I know my experience. I can know something through my experience of it. So yeah, I think that has been something that's been gripping me. And then the other thing that has been gripping me is the idea of there are only two ways of experiencing reality. And those are from the posture of fear and the posture of love. And at any given moment, we can become conscious of the way in which we're experiencing our reality and shift it. And that goes back to us being creators.
Right.
But those are the only two modes in which we can experience life. And that was gripping me and gripping me and gripping me. And I couldn't quite grasp why it was, because it wasn't something that I was directly putting out. And then I went into a spiritual direction session with Dave, who we've had on our podcast before. And he said, that is a direct answer to prayer from my meditation yesterday. So it just illustrates this concept of, when we have something gripping us, maybe it's not directly for us. Maybe it really is our job to talk about it and to kind of ripple it out and see who is this for, and how am I supposed to use this information?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because of course, It's not just for us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's for whoever it gets to, and oftentimes when people riff on it, it comes back, and we get like a new version of whatever it is, because it keeps expanding the more people that get a lens on it, which I love, you know?
Yeah. And I think that this is direct preparation for this is another belief that I am cementing into knowledge for myself, which is I think that this is another part of in direct preparation for us becoming complexes versus individuals. That we
Yeah.
are moving in the direction of a body.
Hmm.
Like this idea of a body having many members has been repeated over millennia in all different
Yeah.
traditions, and it just keeps coming back. And I the one concept that I've had since like my spiritual awakening that I will not ever let go of is this idea of remembering ourselves.
Mhm.
And that has now expanded to remembering not just the individual self, but this collective remembering. Like it's
Mhm.
so incredibly important for me. Like it is my life mission to help others who come into contact with me and for whom this is right to remember themselves, and then us collectively to experience this remembering as a body.
Yeah.
It's so, so important, and it feels urgent. So that's another concept that I've really been mulling over is maybe I am receiving information and maybe it isn't for me, but maybe my job in preparation for this is to be diligent in delivering this information where I feel nudged. And
Mhm.
then maybe in this next stage of our collective evolution, we won't have bodies, but we'll be these complexes that share this ability to connect in lots of different directions and different ways. And then we're sharing all of that information and that feeling. And it's like this whole new expansion of what love can look and feel like.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I think what you just reminded me of is that, like, that we don't know where our part of it is in its evolution,
Yeah.
but we do know that whatever our one part is incredibly important to the whole. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, we think that we have to be part of the big real, the big reveal, or it has to be part of this, but to gain initial momentum in a space, to have a voice that creates a bigger understanding of what's happening is part of it. Like there's all of these small micro movements and things that are part of the whole, that when we do it, it contributes to this beautiful unfolding, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we have no idea how far it's going to go. It could be tens of thousands of years to shift into something, but it's like if our part is this one part, and to your point and your question, which is a beautiful question, what has gripped you and held on, by essence of it holding on, says that it's ours in some way to it's like responding to something deeply inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we're magnets and we attract what it is that's our experience, then when something grips us like that, it's it's almost like a devoted answer that won't let go until it's heard.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're asking for this, and you still haven't heard what I'm saying. I've been saying the answer, but I don't think you're still getting it. It's okay. I'm just going to keep saying it. No
Yeah.
worries,
Ooh, yeah. You and I have both experienced that too. This like, and it comes in two ways for me. One, I'll experience something over and over and over and over and over if I know that that thing showing up is a guidepost that tells me you're on the right track. You're on the right track.
Mhm.
Keep going.
Mm,
There are
like just
certain
like a hiking
times.
trail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'll say this, like I'll say, when you're walking on a trail, you're on the right trail because you'll see the same markers along the trail. Oh, this is the red triangle. Okay, I'm on the right trail. So for me, that's like my blue jay. When my blue jay shows up, I mean, that has shown up for me over the course of my life. So I know that it's not like a message that's trying to get through. It's a, hey, when you show up and do the thing that's aligned with your highest path, that blue jay shows up and you know that that was a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And then something will happen over the course of like that day or that trip or whatever it is that I'll go, oh, wow, this is why this was a step in the right direction. So it
Mm-hmm.
confirms for me, yes, that was my sign. Here's what happened. I can like file this as an experience that confirms.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
there are these things, and you've talked about them, and I wonder if you'd share one where something keeps showing up and you're like, I know this is a message and I haven't quite gotten it yet.
Mm. Whew. Yeah, let me think about that. Like, I don't know if you have one already in mind for something that keeps showing up.
Mm,
Um, it's almost like, okay, so almost along with those that keep showing up, it's almost like amnesia too. It's got an
mhm,
amnesiac, what's the word? Amnesiac. Um, it it's got a tendency to have a touch of denial, or
mm,
you don't quite see it clearly enough to even notice it's a thing yet,
mhm,
or it's a pattern, or that you haven't, like, they're also really kind of sneaky when they show up again. It's almost like it almost presents as if something new, because otherwise you're like an inflated, oh yeah, I've already worked on this,
mm,
right? Or
mhm,
I've already got the message of this. The only thing I can give you as an example is so about 4 or 5 years ago, I watched and found out about the documentary Heal, and it was on Netflix
mm,
at the time. I think it's on Amazon Prime now, and HEAL. And I've never watched anything, hardly twice, definitely not hardly 3 times, but I watched this show 7 times. I watched the show 10 times in 7 days.
mm,
And I was and it was because every time I finished it, I knew there was something that I missed that I needed. And it was like that knowledge was saying, "Hey, watch it again. Hey,
mm.
watch it again. You're not going to get it anywhere else. Watch this again." And so I was like, "Huh, okay. Interesting, interesting." So, I say that because I did watch it again until it finally released me, and it didn't say, "Oh, you're going to have to watch this 10 times in 7 days." It told me again. And then when I got to the 10th time, it was the very last sentence of the show that was like, "Oh my god, I haven't really heard that fully yet."
Hmm.
And it was like the other 9 times I watched it, something had to sink in and I had to experience it and get it
Hmm.
before that last sentence really landed how I needed it to.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I saw that last sentence, it was done and I knew it. I was like, "Oh, that was it." I was like, "God, I've watched this 10 times in 7 days." But it was like something in me knew immediately again until it was done.
I think the reason I couldn't come up with an example is because most of the time when this happens to me, and it happens frequently, once I get the message, it's gone. Like once I get what I needed to get, I can't even think of an example right now.
Mhm.
Because once it sinks in and I get it and I internalize it, I think something shifts and like a piece shifts into place. And then my soul like reorients around this new information and then it's gone.
Mhm.
Um,
So it's almost like it's old news. It's like a part of you now. It's like a
I
part
was
of
going to
you now
use
to
a
where you
terrible like biology metaphor, like
don't.
when you have to copy strands of DNA and there's this special RNA molecule that copies it and it's like the
Yeah,
transfer paper and then it copies it onto the other one and then boom, it's gone.
replicable, yeah. Mhm.
That's what it's like. It's like, what was
Mm.
like, I don't know, but I know that the information now resides in me.
Yeah, right. That makes sense.
So I'm really curious, and we don't get a lot of interaction from our viewers, but I would really, really love if our viewers would share something that's been gripping them, especially because
Mm.
if you're our viewers and if you just stumbled upon this or if you listen regularly, I have a feeling that there is some collective information
Yeah.
that not only spurred the topic of this episode, that made us feel like it was important to discuss, but also that there's something shifting within our collective where something that's gripping you really might just be the exact thing that someone else needs to see or hear right now. So I would really love if people would, leave a little comment on YouTube or on Spotify, or share it with their takeaway, or, wherever you saw this post, Instagram, Facebook, wherever we post, just drop it down below. Wherever you do, it will be right. And, we always value that interaction and the feedback.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the conversation. Good question.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for being willing to open up and answer it so vulnerably.
Yeah.
So thank you to Melissa Moss, an Asheville local artist, for her cover art for our cover art for our show. And thank you to Cloud Cult for their song, There's So Much Energy in Us, for our intro and outro music. And of course, to our viewers and listeners, friends and family, we thank you deeply from the bottom of our hearts, and we send you peace, love, and joy.